Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
I knew I shouldn't have hosted Thanksgiving that year, but there I was anyway, standing in my kitchen, spooning mashed sweet potatoes into a serving dish and pretending like my hands weren't already trembling from anxiety. Something about family gatherings always brought a strange chill to my spine, even before anyone walked through the door. Maybe it was the years of buried tension. Maybe it was the thin veneer of politeness we all wore like ill-fitting masks. Or maybe, deep down, I just knew that sooner or later, something ugly would crawl out from beneath the surface. The moment my sister Kara stepped into my house with her too bright smile and her perfume strong enough to knock over a horse, I felt the tension coil in my stomach like a fist. She hugged me too tightly, said I looked tired, and commented on my kitchen like she'd walked into a stranger's Airbnb. Behind her, her husband Troy lumbered in with a six-pack of cheap beer and a look that screamed boredom. Then came my mother, arms full of pies and critiques, and finally my younger brother Mark, freshly divorced and already halfway drunk before the turkey hit the table. We sat around the table like a scene out of some fake-ass Hallmark movie, clinking glasses and pretending this wasn't the same family that had barely spoken all year. Kara was holding court as usual, telling some story about how her youngest just got into a gifted program, her voice rising with every syllable like she was auditioning for a TED Talk. I just nodded, smiled, and passed the cranberry sauce like my soul wasn't quietly trying to crawl out of my body. I didn't say much. I never really do when Kara's around. There's no point. She has a way of sucking all the air out of the room, always has. Growing up, she was the princess, blonde, bubbly, dramatic in that exhausting way people mistake for charm. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed out of trouble, the one who studied instead of crying for attention. My parents didn't notice my achievements the way they noticed her meltdowns. They gave her love like it was medicine and gave me silence like it was enough. The shift happened sometime around dessert. I was slicing the pumpkin pie, listening to Kara laugh at something Troy said, something unfunny, as usual, when my iPad buzzed from the kitchen counter. I had been checking emails earlier, and apparently, I'd forgotten to close a tab. The notification that flashed across the screen was from my investment app. One brief banner that read, "Portfolio balance updated, $12,423,000. I didn't even notice it at first. But Kara did. She froze mid-bite, squinting toward the screen like it had personally insulted her. "Wait," she said, raising her hand like a goddamn courtroom lawyer. What the hell was that? Everyone turned. I walked over, trying to brush it off, but it was too late. She grabbed the iPad, swiped it open, because of course she knew my passcode, and stared at the screen like it was written in fire. Her jaw dropped. "What the fuck is this, Linda?" I blinked. "It's nothing. Nothing." She laughed, sharp and bitter. $12 million is nothing now? Mark leaned forward. 12 million. My mother's fork dropped to her plate with a loud clang. "You have $12 million? I felt the air shift like a storm rolling in. The room turned on me like I'd just confessed to murder. Kara was already on her feet, waving the iPad like evidence at a trial. "How long have you been sitting on this? How did you even get that kind of money?" I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "I've worked hard. I made some smart investments. That's it." Kara scoffed. "You've always worked a desk job. You're not Warren fucking Buffett." Troy chimed in, his voice smug and heavy. "You know damn well Kara deserves that money more than you ever will." I looked around the table at the faces I'd grown up with, faces that now looked like strangers. Entitled, expectant, resentful. Not one of them asked how I'd done it. Not one of them said congratulations. All they saw was a number, and suddenly I wasn't their sister or daughter. I was a walking ATM who'd apparently committed the crime of doing better than they'd expected. And that was the exact moment I realized this dinner wasn't about family anymore. It was war. It's strange how fast the past can come roaring back, uninvited and merciless, like a goddamn freight train tearing through the walls you've spent decades building just to keep your peace intact. After that dinner, After the bomb dropped and the air turned thick with accusation and entitlement, I sat there in my own house, watching my family circle me like wolves scenting blood. It didn't matter that I cooked the damn meal, cleaned the whole place, or made sure everyone felt welcome. That one number on the screen, that single bank notification, had erased every other part of me. I wasn't Linda anymore. I was just the one who had what they didn't, and in their minds, that meant they were owed something. They wanted answers, and they wanted them fast. Mark leaned forward like he was cross-examining me in court, asking where I got that kind of money and how long I'd been hiding it. My mother sat there shaking her head like I'd committed some moral crime, muttering under her breath about how money changes people and how this isn't how we raised you. Kara just stood by the kitchen counter, arms crossed, tapping her foot like she was waiting for me to confess to robbing a damn bank. I could feel the heat in my chest rising, but I kept my voice even. I invested early, I said slowly, deliberately. I worked hard. I made some good decisions. But the moment those words left my mouth, I knew they wouldn't believe me. Not really. Kara let out a laugh, sharp and humorless, like a blade slicing through the last thread of civility in the room. You worked hard, she snapped, her voice dripping with sarcasm. What the hell does that even mean? You've always been tucked away in some little office job while the rest of us were out here struggling. The rest of us. That phrase hit me harder than I expected. Like I wasn't part of the family anymore, like I'd crossed some invisible line simply by making something of myself. Kara continued, riding the wave of her own self-righteousness. I've suffered, Linda. I've raised 3 kids, stayed home for years, gave up my career, gave up my dreams. You don't get to act like you earn more than me just because you didn't have a family to raise. That line struck me like a punch to the stomach, not because it was true, but because it wasn't. I'd made my sacrifices too, only mine didn't come with baby showers and family photo albums. Mine came in the form of missed vacations, 20-hour workdays, ulcers, loneliness, and more nights than I can count staring at my ceiling wondering if I'd ever feel like it was all worth it. But none of that mattered to them. In their eyes, the only suffering that counts is the kind they can see and point to: stretch marks, dirty diapers, unpaid bills. Quiet pain, the kind that comes from building a life no one claps for, apparently doesn't count for shit. Troy, who hadn't said much yet, finally spoke up from the corner of the room. It's not just about you, Linda. We're family. You should want to share what you have. Share. As if I'd been handed $12 million in a sweepstakes and not bled for every cent. I looked at him, then looked at my mother, who was nodding along like he'd just recited scripture. And then came the real gut punch. My mother turned to me, her voice calm but cold. Maybe this is your chance to redeem yourself a little. You've always been distant, Linda. Maybe now you can finally show us that you care. That one sentence, so simple, so cutting, ripped a hole right through me. Redeem myself? For what? For not needing them the way Kara always did? For not falling apart just so they could feel useful fixing me? For not living in the constant chaos that somehow made Kara their favorite? And you know what really gets me? It's not just the greed, not even the entitlement. It's the way they've rewritten history right in front of me like I wasn't there. Like I don't remember Kara getting brand new bikes while I got her rusted leftovers. Like I don't remember how she crashed the family car and I took the fall because she cried harder and I stayed quiet. Like I don't remember my parents scraping together money for her ballet lessons while I was told books were a luxury we couldn't afford. I was the reliable one, the easy one, the one who didn't cause trouble, so they gave her everything and called it balance. Now here we were, full circle. The golden child crying again, and the quiet one expected to fix it. But something in me snapped that night, right there between the half-eaten pie and the lukewarm coffee. I realized I'd spent most of my life apologizing for being capable. I'd been trained to keep my head down and give more than I take, because that's what kept the peace. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's just quiet resentment wrapped in a pretty bow. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Troy leaned forward again, resting his elbows on the table like he was about to drop some grand wisdom. Maybe, he said slowly, we could talk to someone about this legally. I mean, maybe we could prove you owe it to the family. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I've ever felt. My mother didn't object. Mark didn't laugh. Kara just smiled, small, smug, poisonous. And in that moment, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. They weren't just coming for my money. They were coming for me. After they all left that night, after the last wine glass was rinsed and the half-eaten cranberry sauce scraped into the trash, I just stood there in my kitchen, staring at the empty chairs like they'd personally betrayed me. I could still feel the echoes of their voices, still hear Kara's sanctimonious whining, my mother's guilt-laced jabs, and that smug little line from Troy about what's fair for the family. The house was quiet now, but my head wasn't. It buzzed with a kind of fury I hadn't felt in years, not loud, not explosive, but cold and surgical, the kind that slips into your bones and whispers, "You knew this would happen." And the truth is, I did know. I always knew, somewhere in the back of my mind, that the day I let even a sliver of my success show through the cracks, they'd be there with their hands out and their moral justifications wrapped in family values. That's why I'd kept it all so quiet for so long, lived in a modest house, drove a 6-year-old car, wore department store sweaters while signing off on 6-figure investments. I'd worked hard, yes, but more than that, I'd worked quietly. I didn't flaunt, I didn't gloat, I didn't even explain myself. And somehow, they still made me out to be the villain the second they saw a number that made them uncomfortable. I sat down that night with a glass of bourbon and the lights off, thinking back to how it all started, how I built what I have now with nothing but grit and late nights, and the kind of relentless drive that no one in my family ever bothered to understand. 15 years ago, I started a software company out of my apartment. No one asked about it, no one offered support, and no one thought it was anything more than a phase. Kara used to joke about it during family dinners, Linda's little tech thing, like I was just playing businesswoman in a sandbox. But I pushed through anyway. I worked through migraines and missed holidays and years of being the only woman in a room full of condescending men. I fought for funding, stayed up through endless code rewrites, poured my soul into every product release. And then, 5 years ago, I sold it. Quietly, deliberately, and clean. I didn't throw a party. I didn't even tell anyone, not even Mark. I just signed the papers, took my payout, and kept living the way I always had, low profile, low maintenance, under their radar. In that time, I paid off my mother's mortgage without putting my name on it, cleared Mark's medical debt, even covered Kara's second kid's private school tuition when they, mysteriously, got a scholarship that no one questioned. I never told anyone. I didn't want praise. But now, sitting there in the dark, all I could think was how not a single one of them had ever even said thank you. Not once. The next morning, I got my answer to just how deep the entitlement ran. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard Kara's voice drifting up from the speakerphone in the kitchen. She'd called my mother, probably assuming I wouldn't be around or wouldn't hear. But I did. And every damn word carved itself into my brain like a scar. "I talked to that attorney friend of Troy's," she said, her tone flat and businesslike. "He thinks we might have a case, something about undue familial obligation or equitable distribution if we can prove she used family resources to get where she is." My mother didn't even sound surprised. She just asked what kind of paperwork would be needed. As if it was the most natural next step, to take what wasn't given to them and twist it into something they thought they deserved. I stood there frozen, my hand clenched around a towel, and I swear to God I almost marched downstairs and threw that phone through the damn window. But I didn't. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I didn't give them that satisfaction. I planned. Later that night, I pulled a worn leather notebook out of my office drawer, one I hadn't opened in years. On the front, scratched in faded silver ink, was a single word: contingency. It wasn't some evil master plan or twisted revenge blueprint. It was just a place I kept notes, truths, patterns, things I'd noticed and never said out loud. Things like Kara's mysterious shopping sprees right after Mom's house was paid off, or Mark's sudden recovery from his financial hole that, according to him, just worked itself out. All those little threads I'd pulled quietly in the background, making life easier for them while they acted like the world owed them something. I started writing again in that notebook that night. Not because I needed evidence, though part of me knew I'd use it eventually, but because I needed to remember. I needed to see it all laid out in ink, who I had been to them, and who they had chosen to be to me. Blood might be thicker than water, but it sure as hell isn't thicker than $12 million. And when the people who share your blood start treating your success like a crime, you stop thinking about forgiveness and start thinking about strategy. So I picked up my phone, dialed the one person in my life I could trust not to ask stupid questions or make moral speeches. When my lawyer answered, I didn't hesitate. I didn't stutter or second guess. I just said, I'm ready to play chess. I didn't sleep much in the days following that conversation I'd overheard, not because I was afraid of what Kara might do next, but because I was sharpening every thought like a blade, carefully planning every step of what was about to come. When you spend your entire life being underestimated, being treated like the responsible one, the quiet one, the emotionless one, you learn that your power lies in the fact that no one sees you coming until you're already 10 moves ahead. And this time, I wasn't just playing defense. I was building a goddamn fortress with landmines in the garden. So I sent out a group message, polite and sterile, just enough to keep suspicion low. Family meeting this Sunday at my place, some things I'd like to discuss, I wrote. Within minutes, responses trickled in. Kara's reply was smug and full of implied victory, looking forward to it. Glad you're ready to talk. I could almost hear her voice through the text, full of fake grace and condescension, the same tone she always used when she thought she was winning. Troy simply responded with a thumbs up, probably already thinking about what kind of boat he could buy with my money. My mother didn't say much either, just a cold, "We'll be there," which told me everything I needed to know. They were walking and convinced I was about to bend over backward to prove I still belonged at their precious little table. When Sunday came, I had everything arranged down to the last detail. The living room was spotless, the documents stacked neatly on the coffee table, and my lawyer, whom they didn't know would be attending, waiting in the kitchen, ready to step in the moment the performance began. I greeted them at the door with the kind of calm smile that people mistake for surrender, and I could see the relief in Kara's eyes. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd broken me. Everyone sat, and I didn't waste time with small talk. I stood in front of them, holding the envelope that contained the trust documents, and I looked each one of them in the eye before I spoke. I've thought a lot about what you said, I began, my voice steady but firm, and I realize you're right. Family should look out for each other. So I've decided to do something for Kara. The room shifted instantly. Kara's mouth curled into a victorious little smile, and even my mother looked pleasantly surprised, like she was seeing a long-lost daughter finally come back into the fold. Troy leaned forward like he could already smell the money. I held up the papers and continued, I've created a trust for Kara. It contains $5 million. The reaction was immediate. Mark let out a low whistle. My mother gasped. Troy slapped Kara's back like she'd just scored a touchdown. And Kara, God, Kara stood up and hugged me like she hadn't spent the past week trying to drag my name through legal mud. She whispered something about forgiveness and family, but I didn't even register it because I was too focused on what was coming next. But I said, raising my hand, there are a few important details you should all know. I walked over to the table, laid out the documents, and began listing the terms one by one, deliberately and without emotion. The trust is strictly regulated. The funds are non-transferable, meaning Kara cannot give or loan this money to anyone else, not even Troy, not even Mom. The money can only be used for career development, education, certification, job training, entrepreneurship in verified fields. Every cent will be tracked through quarterly forensic audits. Any misuse will result in immediate forfeiture of the trust and all remaining funds. Kara's smile didn't fade instantly. It cracked slowly, like a mirror under pressure. What the hell is this? She said, voice sharp and rising with every word. You're putting conditions on a gift? It's not a punishment, I said, letting the edge finally creep into my tone. It's an opportunity. You said you gave up your dreams. This is your chance to chase them again. With accountability. With purpose. Not for handbags or Hawaiian vacations, but for you. My mother looked confused. shifting uncomfortably in her chair. Troy looked like someone had just pissed in his beer. And Kara? She went red from the neck up, eyes darting across the documents as if looking for an escape clause that didn't exist. This is bullshit, she snapped, grabbing one of the papers off the table and waving it in the air. You're trying to control me. This isn't generosity. This is manipulation. No, I said, calm as ever. This is structure. This is what adult responsibility looks like. You wanted a share of my success, now earn it. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for, the crescendo of the entire plan. Kara tore through the papers in a tantrum, slamming them back on the table, and muttered something about tearing them up. That's when I smiled, not cruelly, just enough for her to notice, and said, "They're already notarized. Already filed. You can undo it, Kara. You either take the path or you walk away with nothing." The silence that followed was thick and suffocating, and I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. She wanted the money, of course she did, but she didn't want to work for it, didn't want to be monitored, didn't want the humiliating reality that she wasn't entitled to a damn thing she didn't earn. And me? I just sat back in my chair and watched them all squirm, knowing full well that the first move on my chessboard had just been played. And now it was their turn. Some people think revenge needs to be loud and fiery, some dramatic explosion that burns everything to the ground while the villain walks away in slow motion with a smirk. But real revenge, the kind that sticks, the kind that whispers in the corners of someone's mind for years afterward, that kind of revenge is quiet, methodical, and far more satisfying than any single act of rage. What I gave Kara wasn't a punishment, it was a mirror. A painfully clean one that forced her to see herself without the makeup of excuses or the perfume of entitlement. And the more she tried to fight it, the more she tripped over her own reflection. The weeks after the trust was established were a strange kind of theater. Kara made a performance out of pretending to embrace the opportunity like she'd had a sudden spiritual awakening. She told the family she'd always wanted to study psychology, that she was passionate about helping others, that this trust was a blessing in disguise, and she was grateful for the chance to grow. The lies rolled off her tongue smoother than cream, and most of them ate it up at first. She enrolled in some online program, posted photos of textbooks on social media, and even showed up to one class just long enough to snap a selfie next to a lecture slide. It was all smoke and mirrors, and she thought that was all it would take to start pulling funds from the trust. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had built a second layer into that financial fortress. A clause that required quarterly progress reports, certified transcripts, and independent verification before any funds would be released beyond the initial stipend. She got her first check, just enough to enroll and get started, and then hit a brick wall when she tried to request more for what she claimed was research material that, conveniently, looked a hell of a lot like a trip to Aruba. When she called me to scream about it, I let her finish every venom-soaked word before calmly reminding her that this wasn't a personal arrangement, it was a legal contract. She could shout all she wanted, but unless she wanted to forfeit the entire trust, she'd better start attending classes and passing her exams. I could practically hear the rage boiling in her veins. For the first time in her life, someone had built a wall she couldn't charm or manipulate her way through. While Kara was spiraling into frustration and flailing attempts at pretending to care about higher education, I focused my energy somewhere else entirely, her kids. I'd always liked them, even if I hated how they'd been raised to think the world would hand them things just because their mother complained loud enough. But I saw potential in them, raw and quiet, and I decided to invest in it. Not publicly, not through announcements or family meetings, just silent, precise gestures. I opened separate education accounts under their names, reached out to a few contacts I had in different industries, set up internships, mentorships, even paid for test prep courses anonymously. The goal wasn't to replace Kara or become some substitute parent. It was to build something lasting where her chaos had only ever left cracks. The irony, of course, was that the more I helped behind the scenes, the more people started seeing me differently. My mother, once cold and judgmental, began calling just to talk. Mark, who'd once sided with Kara without hesitation, started visiting more often, asking for advice about his career, about money management, about life in general. Even old family friends, the same ones who had once whispered about how selfish I'd become, now came to me like I was some kind of oracle. It wasn't something I had planned, it just happened naturally, like people waking up from a long sleep and finally seeing the truth without needing to be slapped in the face with it. Meanwhile, Kara unraveled. She started drinking more, missing classes, snapping at her kids over nothing, pushing away the very people who had once stood firmly behind her. Troy eventually packed a bag and left, saying he needed space to think but never actually came back. She tried to tell anyone who would listen that I was manipulating everything, that I had orchestrated this entire situation to make her look bad. But it was hard to sell that story when all I'd done, in the eyes of everyone else, was give her $5 million and ask for accountability in return. And that's the beauty of sweet poison. It tastes like honey at first, but by the time the bitterness sets in, you've already swallowed it whole. Kara thought she'd gotten what she wanted. What she really got was a mirror she couldn't look away from, and a spotlight that no longer flattered her. One night, just after 10, I heard banging on my front door loud, erratic, desperate. I opened it to find her standing there, wild-eyed and trembling, mascara streaked down her face, a bottle of wine still clutched in her hand like a lifeline. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at me like I was the one who'd set her world on fire and screamed, "You ruined my life." And all I could think was, no, Kara. You did that all by yourself. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones when someone you've tried to reason with keeps banging on the same broken door, expecting it to open out of guilt, obligation, or sheer pity. That was the energy Kara brought into my house that night, when she stood in my doorway with mascara bleeding down her face and desperation in her voice, screaming like I'd reached inside her chest and ripped out something precious. But I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a victim, not a sister, not even a woman fighting for her life, but a person so used to getting her way that she truly believed a tantrum could still bend the world in her favor. She stood in my living room like she still owned the air between us, demanding answers I'd already given, shouting accusations I wouldn't dignify with responses, hurling guilt like it was confetti and expecting it to stick. "Just give me the damn money," she said again, louder this time, like volume could override reality. "Rip up that trust. Cancel the stupid rules. You know I deserve it." I took a long breath before I said anything, not because I was trying to stay calm, but because I wanted to feel the full weight of the moment before I dropped the final stone. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You didn't want a second chance, Kara. You wanted a shortcut. But life doesn't reward entitlement, it rewards effort. Something you've never learned, and honestly, I don't think you ever will." She stood there frozen, blinking like she'd just been slapped, but there wasn't a single ounce of remorse in her face. Not even a flicker of realization. Just rage and entitlement, that same toxic cocktail she'd been drinking since we were kids, the same one that had convinced her she was always owed something simply because she wanted it bad enough. And when she saw that her screaming wasn't shaking me, that her words weren't slicing me open like they used to, she turned on her heel and walked out without another word, slamming the door behind her so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. I didn't follow her. I didn't watch from the window. I just sat down on the couch, poured myself a small glass of wine, and let the silence fill the space she'd polluted. No apology. No closure. Just the same empty noise she'd always made, finally losing its power. Weeks passed after that night, and the family did what they always do, tried to pretend nothing had happened. My mother called once, pretending to ask about a recipe but clearly fishing for updates. Mark sent a few awkward texts, mostly about his kids. But no one mentioned Kara, and I didn't ask. It was like they'd quietly agreed to erase her outburst from the narrative, like rewriting the story would somehow make them less complicit. But I didn't care anymore. I had already started writing a different ending. A few months later, the letter came, a stiff, impersonal envelope from the institution managing the trust. Kara had officially withdrawn from the program. No credits earned, no certifications, not even an effort to fake progress this time. The trust, per the terms we'd agreed upon, was dissolved. The remaining funds reverted. $5 million, untouched, now back in my control. I held the letter for a long time, thinking not about the money itself, but about what it represented, the opportunity she threw away, the chance she had to actually prove something beyond her last name. And then, just like that, I knew exactly what to do with it. I contacted my financial advisor, outlined every detail carefully, and made the arrangements without a second thought. That $5 million now sits in a scholarship fund for women over 30 who want to start over, women who left abusive marriages, women who gave up careers for children and now want them back. Women who never got the chance because no one ever believed in them. I named the fund after Kara, not as a tribute, not out of kindness, but because I wanted her to see what real legacy looks like. I wanted her to know that her name could still mean something good, even if she never lived up to it. And in the months that followed, I didn't gloat, didn't announce anything on social media, didn't send out press releases or post inspirational quotes. I just watched as one woman after another applied for the fund, each with stories that made my chest ache and my heart swell. Real women. Real struggle. Real effort. The kind Kara had always mocked, now receiving the opportunity she had spat on. Funny how things work, isn't it? In the end, the same people who once called me selfish now treat me like the steady hand they wish they had. The same voices that used to whisper behind my back now speak my name with respect. And Kara? I hear bits and pieces. She moved into a smaller place, blames the world, blames me, blames everyone but herself. But I don't waste energy thinking about her anymore. There's nothing left to say, and nothing worth repeating. Sometimes revenge isn't a firestorm or a dramatic ending with screaming and shattered glass. Sometimes it's a quiet, deliberate decision to build something better than the mess they made of you. Sometimes it's giving the gift they never deserved to someone who will treasure it. Sometimes it's doing exactly what they never expected, walking away, rising above, and never looking back. They wanted to see me fall. Instead, I watched them trip over their own greed. And honestly, that silence was worth more than $12 million.